Humans have this idea that language is unique to the human species, that no other animal or organism has language. They'll say, sure, other things can communicate, but language is uniquely human. The idea behind this is that humans can convey complex ideas and abstract thoughts through language that no other organism is capable of. Humans like to say that they have language and all other life forms just communicate. But the arguments break down pretty fast. We associate the uniqueness of human language with the exceptionalism of the human species. Yet there are plenty of other beings who use language that are unique to that species. There is the mycorrhizal language. The bees have a dancing language. Ants use the language of pheromones. Birds have song language, and whales have their bellows. It's the equivalent of going to another country and saying, I don't understand your language, therefore you don't have any. All of language, whether it is a human language or languages from other beings, they have this in common. Languages tell stories. That is all that they do. There is no higher form of language. There is no lesser language. It doesn't matter the form of language. It could be body language, it could be movement and dance, it could be through sensing vibrations, through pheromones, through scent, through noises and gestures, and other kinds of movements and manipulations and senses of the body. Everything is capable of telling its own story. Because of this, everything is telling its own side of the story, its own perspective in its own way. But there's a couple things going on here. When people talk about the mycorrhizal network or social animals or communal animals, they tend to avoid using human terms to describe them. They'll say that that doesn't adequately describe how these organisms are living and experiencing. They'll argue against saying that the mycorrhizal network is engaging in trade and that there's politics in the forest and intrigue and sarcasm and cooperation and competition and betrayal and lying and scheming. Humans will say those are uniquely human things and nothing else in the whole world is like humans. We are exceptional. The stories that we use to describe our perception of other organisms and entities is just as valid as those entities having their own conscious and cognitive perceptions and the stories that they tell between each other. It all comes down to the way in which humans view themselves as separate from nature. They view themselves as having transcended nature. Even the people that say we have to be one with nature or we have to go back to nature are still taking that stance of human exceptionalism. Nature is an abstract concept to denote a organic living environment. We are as much a participant in that as anything else. And then people will say that humans have less human cells than microbial cells. The reason this is faulty is because the trillions of beings in you are part of who you are. And that part moves and flows through you and between other people and environments and objects. And anything that is itself has ways of understanding itself, even if it's only through the subconscious language of stories. But remember, all things share in storytelling. Microorganisms are a part of you, and they have stories, and you can learn those stories, and you can tell stories back to them. These kinds of back and forth stories are what humans have called mythology. A myth is a subconscious story, and nothing is more involved in the subconscious than the microscopic. One of the big problems of modern microbiology is that it assumes that because we discovered them through microscopes, anyone before and anyone that comes after that isn't using a microscope isn't able to see them or understand them or even know that they exist. You are allowed to know the things that are actively participating in your existence and health. And you do this because there are languages that don't use words, languages between and across various entities, from microorganisms to animals and entire ecological systems. You could enter a forest and say it collectively has a certain feel to it, or you could say the same thing about a house. Something as simple as inflammation can tell you that the beings you house and cultivate are not doing well. Don't be so caught up in the language of fact and data and logic and science and human methods of communication. Why? Because they're just stories, and they're stories that try to impose themselves on you. I could tell you how to sense and talk to microorganisms, and you do it the way you do with anything else. You just talk to it. We believe so strongly in our own individuality as individuals and as a human species. The idea of human and humanity, those are just labels. Those are just ways of telling stories, and I don't have to buy into that. I don't have to consider myself a human. I don't have any allegiance to that perspective. Life is the story that you are living, and that story is shared and expressed and told between, across, and from everything. If you don't want to believe that there are signs and omens and feelings and intuition and communication and luck and synchronicity that are all part of these stories and the way that they are relayed from and between things, you don't have to. You can believe in human exceptionalism and that nothing in the whole universe will ever be like humans. And the whole time you'll see everything fall apart around you. And it's just because you're mean. You're a mean storyteller, and you're mean to microbes, you're mean to plants and animals and to other people and to yourself. Being involved in the story of your own life and the lives of all the entities and beings around you, that is what the Taoists meant about being in the Tao. And so on for all these other mythologies of being connected to the land, of being with the gods, of being with the spirits and the ancestors. Because these entities were there too, and they still have those stories, and you can relearn and retell those stories that we think of as being lost. The disconnection of nature people feel, the reason why that idea is even a concept is because people are no longer talking to anything, no longer sharing and telling stories of these things they experience to each other and to the actual entities around them. Random rant over. Thanks for watching.